No one could handle the billionaire's daughter until a single dad janitor did the impossible. The morning sunlight poured through the tall, imposing glass windows of the Sterling Crest Academy, a school known not just for its Ivy League preparatory education, but for the titans of industry and billionaire heirs who walked its hallowed halls like modern royalty. And among them was her, Seraphina Vance. Everyone knew her name, but no one dared say it too loud. She was the daughter of Marcus Vance, the wealthiest, most ruthless man in the city, and she was her father's daughter. Let me paint you a picture. Just last month, a new optimistic history teacher, Mr. Henderson, made the mistake of giving Seraphina a B+ on a paper she'd clearly paid someone else to write. He believed in academic integrity. Seraphina didn't yell. She didn't scream. She simply looked at him with cold, empty eyes and said, "You'll regret that." She made a single phone call. By noon, Mr. Henderson was called into the principal's office. By 3 o'clock, he was packing his desk, his career in ruins. That was Seraphina Vance. Teachers feared her temper. Students avoided her glare. She was a ghost who could get you fired. The staff whispered about how cold she was, how she never smiled, how she walked through the world as if it were an inconvenience. Every attempt to reach her, to discipline her, to simply talk to her, ended in failure. Until one Monday morning, when a new janitor walked through those same glass doors. He was a quiet man, probably in his late 30s. His name was Leo Gray. His hands looked rough, calloused from years of work. His blue uniform was faded and worn at the elbows, and his eyes, though tired, had a strange, settled gentleness in them. A sadness, maybe, but a gentleness. People didn't pay much attention to him. He was just there to mop floors and empty trash cans, an invisible part of the scenery. But what no one at Sterling Crest knew was that Leo Gray wasn't just a janitor. He was a single dad. He had a little girl, about 8 years old, named Mia. She waited for him every evening at a small, cramped apartment on the other side of the city, in a neighborhood these Sterling Crest families only ever drove over. Mia was his entire world. His wife, Clara, had been an artist. She saw beauty in everything. She'd lost her fight with a long illness 3 years ago, and with her, all the color in Leo's world had vanished. He'd put away his own paintbrushes, his own dreams, and just survived. For Mia, her colorful, chaotic drawings covered their peeling refrigerator door, and every night, before bed, she'd wrap her arms around his neck, her small voice a perfect echo of her mother's. "Did you smile today, Dad? Did you find something good?" And every night he'd kiss her forehead and reply, "I tried my best, little bird. I always do." The first time Leo crossed paths with Seraphina Vance was on a Tuesday. It was in the north hallway, outside the art studio. She was yelling, not just talking, but yelling, at a nervous-looking librarian who had apparently misplaced a reserved book. "Do you have any idea how much my father pays to keep this place running?" Seraphina's voice was sharp, cutting. "He pays your salary. Now find the book." The librarian was trembling, on the verge of tears. Leo was sweeping nearby, the rhythmic shush-shush of his broom the only other sound. Seraphina whipped her head around, her glare landing on him. "What are you looking at?" she snapped. The hallway went silent. The librarian froze, expecting the next explosion. Leo stopped sweeping. He looked at her directly, not with fear, not with anger. He just looked, and then he offered a small, polite smile. He didn't say a word. He just nodded as if acknowledging her presence, and then very calmly continued sweeping. No one had ever done that. No one smiled at her without fear. No one looked at her like she was just normal. It made her freeze. Her anger faltered, replaced by a sudden, jarring confusion. Why isn't he scared? Is he stupid? She thought. She stared at him for a long second. Then angrily, she turned on her heel and stormed away. The next morning, Leo was cleaning the same hallway again, mopping this time. Seraphina was walking toward him, holding a large steaming coffee cup. She saw him. He saw her. He was in her path. He moved his mop bucket to the side, giving her plenty of room. He nodded politely. "Good morning." She watched him, her eyes narrowed. She walked closer. This was a test, a power play. Just as she passed him, she looked him right in the eye, and her hand slipped. The cup fell, hot coffee splashing across the polished marble floor, splattering the toes of his work boots. She waited for him to flinch, to grovel, to get angry, waited for him to beg her not to report him for being in her way. Leo just sighed softly, looking at the mess. He set his mop aside and went to his cart, pulling out a handful of towels. Without a word, he bent down and began to clean it up. "It's okay," he said softly, not even looking at her. "Accidents happen." She stared at him, completely baffled. He wasn't afraid. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even annoyed. He was just cleaning the mess. He spoke to her like she was human, not powerful, not intimidating, just a person who had an accident. She walked away without saying a word, but that afternoon she went to the principal's office. "That new janitor," she said, her voice dripping with ice. "He's incompetent. He bothers me. Get rid of him." The principal, a man who valued his mortgage, turned pale. He called Leo into his office. He explained, shamefaced, that Miss Vance had made a complaint. Leo just listened. And when the principal was done, he just nodded. "I understand, sir. I need this job. My daughter, I'll be more careful. I'll try to be more invisible. It won't happen again." The principal, seeing Leo's raw humility and the desperation in his eyes, felt a sudden, profound sense of shame. "No," he said, surprising himself. Just try to stay out of the north hallway for a while, Mr. Gray." When Seraphina learned he was only given a warning, she was furious. Her power hadn't worked. For the first time, she was intrigued. Days turned into a week. She started noticing him, really noticing him. She saw how he always greeted every student, even the ones who mocked him. She saw him after school, using his own tools and wood putty from his own lunchbox to repair a broken locker door for a freshman who was crying, even though it wasn't his job. She saw him carrying heavy boxes of textbooks for teachers who never bothered to say thank you. And one afternoon, in the small, forgotten garden behind the school gymnasium, she saw something that changed everything. She had skipped her last class, a common occurrence. She was walking the perimeter of the school, bored and restless, when she heard it. Laughter. It wasn't the polite, strained laughter of her world. It was free, loud, and full of joy. She followed the sound and looked through the hedges. There he was, Leo, sitting on a worn-out wooden bench, holding a small dented metal lunchbox. Inside were 2 sandwiches, cut into triangles. Next to him sat a little girl with messy pigtails and the brightest smile Seraphina had ever seen, his daughter Mia. She must have been dropped off by the school bus. "And then," Leo was saying, his voice full of mock terror, "the tickle monster said, 'I'm gonna get you.'" He launched a gentle attack, his rough fingers wiggling into the little girl's sides. She shrieked with laughter, falling back onto the grass. "No, Daddy, no! I have the anti-tickle shield." "Oh no, the shield!" he cried, falling back in pretend defeat. They were laughing so freely, so completely, that it felt like something from another planet. It didn't fit the cold, calculated world she lived in. From a distance hidden by the trees, Seraphina watched them. He handed his daughter half of his sandwich. She took it and then broke her own half and gave it back to him. "We share, Daddy," the little girl said seriously, "because we're a team." "That's right, little bird," he said, kissing her head. "We're a team." That laughter, that warmth, that team. It felt like something she had lost, or maybe something she never had. She thought of her own father. The only team they had was a team of lawyers. A few weeks later, the Academy held its annual Spring Arts Gala. Seraphina, a gifted painter like her mother, was presenting her centerpiece. It was a massive canvas, dark and abstract, filled with chaotic slashes of black, gray, and deep crimson. It was called Isolation. The audience of wealthy parents and faculty clapped politely. Her father, Marcus Vance, was in the front row, but he was checking his phone. She looked at the crowd, her face a familiar mask of bored indifference. Then out of nowhere, a small figure ran right up to the stage. It was the janitor's daughter, Mia. She had slipped away from her father, who was working the event, collecting trash in the back. She held a crumpled piece of drawing paper in her tiny hands. She stood in front of Seraphina, in front of everyone, and looked up at the giant dark painting. "Your painting is sad," Mia said, her voice clear in the silent auditorium. "It's all stormy." Seraphina just stared at her. "You should add yellow," Mia said, holding up her own drawing. It was a bright, chaotic picture of a sun with a smiley face. "Yellow makes everything happy. It's the color of sunshine and Dad's pancakes." The room went silent. Marcus Vance finally looked up from his phone. His eyes narrowed. "Leo," he barked, "get your child out of here." Everyone expected Seraphina to yell, to scold the child, to have her removed. Leo rushed forward, his face pale with panic. "Mia, I'm so sorry, Miss Vance. I'm so sorry." He reached for his daughter's hand, but Seraphina did the impossible. She stepped between her father and Leo. "Stop, father," she said, her voice shaking but loud. The microphone picked it up. She's right," the crowd gasped. Marcus was dumbfounded. Seraphina knelt, right there on the stage, in her $1,000 dress. She looked at Mia, at the crumpled drawing of the sun, and for the first time in public, people saw tears well up in Seraphina Vance's eyes. She gently took the drawing from Mia. "Thank you," she whispered. She stood up, took Mia's hand, and led her off the stage, past her stunned father, and over to Leo. "It's okay," she whispered, her voice choked. "It's okay. Accidents are good sometimes." That night, she went back to the art studio. She repainted everything. She added yellow, bright, brilliant streaks of it, cutting through the darkness. From that day on, things began to change. The girl who once yelled at librarians now quietly volunteered in the library, reshelving books. The girl who avoided people started tutoring younger students. Other rich kids noticed. One afternoon, a popular boy named Brent saw her in the hall, helping Leo fix his wobbly cart. "Well, well, princess," Brent sneered. "Playing with the help now? How charitable." Seraphina didn't even look at him. She just tightened a bolt and said, "It's better than being empty, Brent." He was so shocked, he just walked away. The teachers whispered again, but this time in total disbelief. And sometimes she would sneak out behind the school, to the garden, and sit beside that same bench. She'd share her expensive gourmet lunch with a janitor and his daughter, trading her imported grapes for a triangle of a peanut butter sandwich. No one could explain it, but everyone noticed one thing. The billionaire's daughter had finally learned how to smile again. And it all started with the kindness of a man who swept floors, but who understood human hearts better than anyone else ever could. The real turning point, the moment that defined her new life, came one bitter winter morning. Leo Gray didn't show up for work. The halls felt wrong, empty. His cart, his quiet sweeping, his gentle greetings. It was all missing. Seraphina felt a cold knot of panic she hadn't felt in a long time. By noon, word spread. He had collapsed in his apartment. He was hospitalized with a severe, fast-moving pneumonia. He had no insurance. He was in a public ward. Worse, another janitor told her that because he was in the hospital, his daughter Mia had been placed in emergency foster care, a state group home. Seraphina didn't hesitate. She didn't walk. She ran. Straight out of the school, past her driver, and into a cab, heading for her father's downtown office. She burst into his penthouse boardroom. Her father, Marcus Vance, was in the middle of a hostile takeover negotiation, surrounded by 20 lawyers. "Seraphina? What is this? I'm busy. Get out." "No," she said. The entire room fell silent. "What did you say to me?" "I said no. Leo Gray is in the hospital. He's dying. His daughter is in a state home. You are going to fix it." Marcus Vance actually laughed. A cold, sharp sound. "I am in the middle of a $1 billion deal, and you interrupt me for a janitor? I don't pay for the help, Seraphina. It's not my problem." "He's my friend," Seraphina said, her voice shaking but strong. "He's the only person who's been kind to me in 10 years. You will move him to a private wing at the best clinic. You will get the best doctors, and you will get Mia out of that place." "Or what?" Marcus sneered. "You'll stop taking your allowance? You'll be cut off. Don't be a fool." Seraphina looked at her father. All the fear she ever had of him, it was gone, replaced by a cold, clear purpose. "Or," she said, her voice quiet but echoing in the silent room, "I will call the Post. I will call every news outlet in the city, and I will tell them how my father, Marcus Vance, the city's great philanthropist, is letting his own employee die in a public ward while his 8-year-old daughter is in a group home. I'll tell them about the real Vance family. I'll tell them about Mr. Henderson. I'll tell them everything." Marcus stared at her. He wasn't seeing his petulant daughter. He was seeing himself. He was seeing an opponent who was not bluffing. He slowly, furiously closed his laptop. "Get out," he said to her. "No, make the calls, now, while I watch." For a long, tense minute, they stared at each other. Marcus broke first. He snatched up his phone. "Get me Dr. Harrison at the private clinic. I have an incoming patient, and get my legal team on the line. Find a girl named Mia Gray. I want her moved." Now, Seraphina watched him, then turned and walked out of the room. Weeks later, Leo returned to work, weaker but alive. And confused. He'd been moved to a luxury room with doctors he couldn't afford. When he was discharged, Mia was there, waiting for him, having been kept safe in a private home. He was told it was an anonymous donor. But when he walked into the Sterling Crest Academy, he knew. He found a surprise waiting for him. The hallway he always cleaned, the one outside the art studio, had been freshly painted. It was a bright, brilliant yellow. On the wall in beautiful, careful gold lettering was a new sign. It read, "Sometimes the smallest hearts hold the greatest strength." It was her idea, her way of saying thank you. From that day forward, Seraphina Vance's life was her own. She started a new program at the school, the Sterling Fund, which paid for the full health insurance of every single janitor, cook, and groundskeeper on staff. Her father watched from a distance, and slowly he began to change too. He realized something he'd forgotten. Money can buy luxury, but kindness builds a legacy. 1 year later, a new building was being dedicated at the academy. It wasn't a business school. It was the Clara Gray Center for Arts and Humanities, named after Leo's late wife. Leo was there, in a new clean suit. He was no longer a janitor. He was the center's new director of community outreach. Mia stood beside him, holding his hand. Marcus Vance was there too. He had funded the entire building. He looked softer. Seraphina stood at the podium. She was running the new Vance Family Foundation. Her speech wasn't about money or power. It was about how one person with nothing but a kind heart can build a legacy stronger than stone. Later that afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the academy's glass walls, 3 people sat on a familiar wooden bench in the garden. Leo, Mia, and Seraphina. They were sharing a lunchbox, 2 sandwiches cut into triangles. Mia giggled. "Your dad, he changed my life," Seraphina said softly, her voice thick with emotion. The little girl giggled. "He says kindness is like sunlight. You can't see it, but you can feel it, and it helps things grow." Seraphina smiled, a real, genuine smile through her tears. She looked at Leo. He smiled back. "Then I hope," she whispered, "I can be someone's sunlight too." That day, in that golden light, it was clear. It wasn't wealth or power or status that changed hearts. It was simple human kindness, the kind that sweeps floors and shares sandwiches and reminds us all to add a little yellow to the world.